Welcome to Sustainability in Wine Country, the online series hosted by Cork and Fork in Logan Circle, Washington, D.C. My name is Antoinette Londejon, and it is a pleasure to be with you today. We will start this class with a brief introduction, followed by our guest speaker's presentation and introduction to their organization. This is the 8th masterclass in the series in Sustainable Wine Country, focusing on sustainability in viticulture. The first masterclass of this series addressed the efforts made by New Zealand and their wine growers in their sustainability movement. We then heard from the Lodi Rules team and Dr. Stephanie Bolton. Staying with the Californian focus, after Lodi Rules, we heard from the Fish-Friendly Farming Certification Program of the California Land Stewardship Institute, hosted by Laurel Marcus. Following, we heard from Dr. Marty Longbottom, Sustainability and Viticulture Manager at the Australian Wine Research Institute. Last week, we enjoyed Anna Britton's presentation on Napa Green. We then had the great pleasure of learning about the South African wine industry's sustainability movement from Jim Clark. We then took a pause to enjoy a wine tasting with Wine Australia's Head of Education, Mark Davidson. And this evening, we are delighted to introduce the Porto Protocol with Marta Mendoza. The Porto Protocol is a nonprofit foundation founded by Taylor's Port that counts hundreds of global companies and individuals united by a binding commitment to act against climate change. They welcome members who subscribe to their letter of principles to develop or continue a program and/or solution to mitigate climate crisis and share the results. They work as an open and shared platform, a dynamic database of resources, ideas, programs, and workable solutions. They invite companies and individuals worldwide to collaborate by implementing and sharing solutions and positive changes towards climate change. Our host for this event is, as mentioned, Marta Mendoza. Marta has built most of her career in marketing and sales, having worked with various brands, countries, industries, and companies. In the past few years before joining Porto Protocol, Marta was working with her own brand and consultancy project, through which she took sustainability and climate advocacy to schools, events, and companies, promoting awareness and encouraging change. Marta holds a degree in international relations, a postgraduate in marketing, and a master in corporate social responsibility. We are so excited to introduce you, our viewers, to Marta, and delighted to now begin the presentation. Thank you to all for being a part of this Sustainability in Wine Country series. We hope you enjoy it. Marta, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Antoinette. Thank you very much for that presentation. You saved me a lot of time because you already introduced what we are about as an organization. So even before I start presenting the presentation itself, I think it makes sense, and I had not planned this, to start with the story behind Porto Protocol, because it has very much to do with the purpose on why we came to life. And the purpose is actually a vision that makes complete sense, which is from our CEO, Adrian Bridge, that is also the CEO of the Floodgate Partnership, which is a group of companies, which probably the one you know the best is Taylor's Port, that is known in the US as Taylor's Floodgate. And his vision, that is very much our mission as an organization, came from the fact that climate change is an absolute reality. There is science-based evidence that that is the case. We're just about to start in a couple of days, COP26, to address this issue. And there's no need to reinvent the wheel when it comes to solutions. So solutions are out there, and there are companies in every stage, and I'll talk a little bit about that. There are companies doing things all over the world and it makes much more sense that we share it as businesses. It makes much more business sense that we share it, therefore saving time and resources in looking for solutions ourselves, and therefore accelerating the response to climate change. And so this is the vision behind that made Porto Protocol come to life. And I'll explain also why, even before I start the presentation, because I believe all this makes sense. And there are several reasons why we believed And we believe that it makes sense for the wine industry to take the leadership when it comes to climate response, to climate leadership. And one of the reasons is the fact that, and I think that happens in the US as well, especially, and when you talk about the old world, this gains a new dimension, which most wine companies have been around for decades, if not centuries. To give you an example, Taylor's itself has been around for more than 380 years. Now, that's not uncommon in Europe, in countries such as France, Italy, Spain, Portugal, and even in the New World, even if you go to the US or South Africa, Argentina, Chile, at least decades, you can find companies that have been around for decades, and in many cases, in the same family. So this idea of thinking long-term is really common to the industry. So when we think of a climate response and wanting to be stewards of the land and making sure that we safeguard this company, this way of living to the next generation is something very common. So this is one of the reasons why it makes sense for an organization like ours and an industry like ours to take the lead when it comes to climate change. And even before I go into the presentation itself, there are a few other reasons that also make sense when it comes to the wine industry. Another is the fact that the crop itself, vineyards are extremely resilient. And so when we're talking about climate change, this crop is a lesson in a way of climate resilience. To give you an idea, for example, taking into account that we are an organization that works from Porto to the world, although we are based here, we are an international organization, but our birth is in the Douro Valley. The Douro Valley itself is a story of climate resilience, and this is because I don't know if you've had the pleasure of being there, if you have ever been there. It's an amazing place in terms of beauty, but it's also an amazing place in terms of conditions because they are so. It's such a rough place when it comes to climate, and only grapes could grow there. So. Again, it's indeed a case of climate resilience that is a lesson to the rest of the world, especially because it's only vineyard in the slopes, with a high altitude. So it's an amazing place to go, and there's a lot to learn. Another thing is there are not many crops that speak directly to the consumer. So when you, for example, there are wines that we drink that we know exactly from which vine they came. I mean, we can say precisely in which grapes produce that wine. And when you're eating a tomato or an apple, that's something that you don't have. You don't have that relation. I mean, that's what terroir is about. This sense of place is unique to wine. And furthermore, wine is so much more than a crop. It's culture, it's pure culture. And you have that in the US. We have this, every single country that we can think that produces wine has this sense of place that is unique, where wine is way much more than a crop. It's not just, it's indeed a luxury product, but it's part of our culture. And many nationalities can say this. It's much more than culture. And thinking that there are places where only grapes could grow, this also comes to the fact that the importance of wine has not only to do with the climate itself, but also with socioeconomic factors. For example, again, using the Douro Valley as an example, because only grapes could grow there, the wine industry is the main industry for employment to a whole region. So this is just to give you an idea on why an organization such as ours taking the lead when it comes to climate change made sense. So this is very much the purpose. And again, still before I go into the presentation, and I hope you don't mind, this led to two important conferences, which were where Porto Protocol actually was born. They were called Climate Change Leadership Solutions for the Wine Industry. Again, they were organized by Taylor Sport, and the idea was very much, and I'll go through that as well, was very much to focus on solutions and not the problem of climate change. well, those two conferences took place in 2018 and 2019. The first one had Barack Obama as keynote speaker, and the second one is Al Gore. I know these two gentlemen have nothing to do with wine, but the rest of the guests did. And they were two amazing conferences and extremely inspirational. And the idea, as our name says, we are a protocol that was born in the city of Porto. And that's exactly the first step to join Porto Protocol, which is to sign our letter of principles, which is a protocol in which you commit to do more to climate change. Now, this was just to give you a little bit of context on what is behind, on how the organization was born, and above all, on why this organization was born. So now I am going to share with you the presentation itself. I hope you can see my screen, yeah? Okay, so I have something in front of my screen. Sorry. Okay, so now I'm going to go through, okay, so why is he asking me this? Sorry, just let me, okay. So now Antoinette has told you a lot about us, and I just made an introduction on Porto Protocol, on why we came to life. And ultimately, as we said, we are an international foundation. Today we are a foundation with hundreds of members spread across the wine value chain. And this means I'll go to more or less where we are represented. But the idea at the end of the day is that we generate interaction between all these members, which is not easy. It's a challenge, and even learning how to do it is a challenge in itself. So our vision is, and that's very much, of course, a vision is sometimes a little bit of an utopia, but at the end of the day, it's what we would like to achieve. And that's what we work for every day, which is a world where collective and individual entities join efforts to act together to slow and reverse climate change. And our mission has a lot to do with the reason why we came to life, to drive collaborative action by bringing together a network of change makers and workable climate solutions for and within the wine world. We believe that we should achieve this through sustainability, optimism, that's absolutely key in everything we do, through sharing, that's also key, through responsibility, collaboration, and commitment. So how do we do this? How do we achieve this mission? What we are trying to do, actually what we are building, is an open and live platform of knowledge and experiences built upon collaborative sharing. What this means is that collaborative sharing is the name of the game at the end of the day. So, and to explain a little bit how this works, when we're talking about a platform of solutions, is literally a platform of solutions. So when you go to our website, for example, you can find, imagine that you're looking for solutions for water management, for example. So you can find solutions that have been shared by our members across the wine value chain that have to do with water management. Furthermore, for example, another thing that we have, and I believe you might have, actually, I know you've watched Antoinette, we have climate talks, which are webinars in which we gather guests from around the world, from companies from completely different sizes, stages of climate action, and with completely different experiences, come to discuss a specific topic and share how they've addressed that particular topic and challenge. So what we're trying to do is be a driver of change and a hub to connect people, because at the end of the day, though we might be doing a platform of solutions where you can go and search as a search engine, so to speak, at the end of the day, what we want is to connect people. And that makes all the difference. That's why we do our climate talks, exactly to have people connect with each other and be able to learn with each other. And of course, we want our audience to learn as well and to feel inspired to change and to be able to take home tips on how to change. But if those three people in that digital table are able to have chemistry, so to speak, and are able to talk with each other and actually trigger a conversation, not just question and answer type of webinar. If they are able to interact, then we are really building this network of change makers around the world, and that's exactly what we are doing, and therefore leading the way in terms of the wine industry. So what do we believe is our unique selling proposition, so to speak, if we can use in this context? We have an eagle's eye view of the world, of the wine world, and it's absolutely amazing. As we speak as a team, we speak to hundreds of members every day. Not every day, of course, but we've spoken to hundreds of people since we joined Porto Protocol, and we've spoken to people from Ukraine that I must admit I didn't even know they produced wine, but it's a country that has been producing wine for a long time. To Sweden, to the US, to South Africa, to Portugal, Spain, Chile, Argentina, and it's absolutely amazing to speak to the whole world and get an idea of what is happening in terms of wine and climate change. So we have an idea of trends. What are the new trends, so to speak, when it comes to again climate change and wine, when it comes to sustainability in wine? What are the best practices? What are the best processes? What are the solutions that are being implemented in Chile that can be replicated in South Africa? What are the challenges that are being faced not only by wine producers, but by retailers, by consultancy companies within wine value chain, by marketing companies that work with the wine industry? And that's why it's so amazing to work with the industry as a whole. What are the policies that are being implemented, and what are the learnings? And the fact that we have this eagle's eye, that's what enables us to create knowledge and to be able to get a real feel and experience of what is happening in the wine industry. To give you an example, I remember a year ago, more than a year ago, when we had our first climate talk on regenerative viticulture. And at the time we invited one of the most inspiring people we've had the chance of meeting since we've joined this organization. You might have heard of her. Her name is Mimi Castillo. She's been on 2 of our climate talks. And whereas today, a year later, I think it's been I think it was in October last year that we have our first climate talk. And whereas suddenly, as we speak today in October 2024, the word regenerative is like spread everywhere, and it's used for absolutely everything. A little bit like sustainability, but we'll get there. A year ago, it was just arising, and it's amazing to see how this trend evolved from being a niche to almost becoming mainstream, which is sometimes a little bit dangerous as well, because we're talking about something and a term becomes part of our terminology, of our common terminology, and we don't even know what it means. So on one hand, it's amazing. On the other hand, it's important to clarify concepts, to make sure that when we're discussing them, we are talking about the exact same thing. We'll do that, and we'll not do that today in regards to regenerative viticulture, but we'll do that in regards to sustainability, because that's one of the things that we've realized. It's suddenly so many concepts became common in our everyday lives, and we don't even know exactly what they mean. And this is true not only regarding sustainability, but for example, regarding carbon neutrality, although that one is more straightforward, carbon footprint. So all these concepts became so common in our terminology that it's good to clarify them. But anyway, going back to what I was saying, what we have as an organization is an amazing eagle's eye view, because we travel the world every day, so to speak, and are able to speak with a variety of people that show us what they are doing and where we should go next. And as I mentioned before, I think at the very beginning, one of the amazing things of what we do is we focus on climate change, but from a solutions perspective, and never from a problems perspective. This is very easy when, for example, if you go to our website and even the news we share, it's very seldomly do we share news that have to do with the bad things about climate change. Of course, when the new IPCC report came out, of course we had to share it. But on a daily basis, what we do, and that is amazing in what we do, is we focus on solutions. And what we notice is that the mindset of focusing on solutions, it's eye-opening, and it's opening for the people we talk to as well. Because if we just focus on the fact that climate change is destroying our species, and if we don't get out of there, we are not able to look at the future, because it's so dooming that it's really depressing. I'm sorry for the word. So it's absolutely amazing to focus on the solution. And so moving on from our focus on climate change, because that's what very much we do as an organization, what we realized is, again, in our daily conversations, it's very hard not to mix sustainability. So though we focus on climate solutions and climate action, as we speak to players of the wine world on a daily basis, it's very, very hard not to get it mixed with climate change. And in fact, an interesting thing, and as I was preparing for this talk today, I spoke to one of our members in the US, and I was telling him, look, one of the things that I was in a workshop the other day, and one of the things I heard was that when we speak about sustainability in Europe, we're generally associated to climate change, whereas when we speak about it in the US, it has more to do with diversity and equity. And I was like, what do you think? You're in the US, because sometimes the cultural differences might create a blockage in the way we see things. What do you think of this? And he says, no way, I don't see it. Our view is completely different. In the US, I believe that when we think of sustainability, we associate it to climate change. And if we're talking about diversity or social justice, we think it's something completely different. And that's why whatever we do, whatever presentation we do, we believe it's really key that we start by saying what sustainability is. And no matter what conversation you might have, sustainability has been around since the 80s, and it was spoken about in the United Nations. So whatever conversation we have about sustainability, it is important that it takes into account the environmental, the economic, and social dimensions of sustainability. In fact, if we look at the original concept, it came out in the Brundtland report, and it says that sustainable development, at the end of the day, sustainability, it's the development that meets the needs of the present without compromising the ability of future generations to meet their own needs. So no matter what we talk in terms of sustainability, we are not just talking about the environmental dimension or climate change. We are always talking about these three dimensions. And another thing that we find is that it's absolutely key to build the business case for responsible business, therefore the sustainable business. In fact, there are studies already in the US, and we have it, and I'm happy to share it in the end if that's useful to you as well. There are studies regarding trade and consumers in wine regarding sustainability, but just to have an idea of some of the numbers that we have nowadays in terms of research, 89% of millennials believe that business should be a leading force for positive social impact, which is up from 76% in 2017. 67% of consumers will pay more for sustainable products. 1 trillion is the combined cost of the climate emergency on the 250 largest global companies, and 12 trillion in business opportunities created by the global goals, that is from the Business Sustainable Development Commission. This is data that comes from there. And so narrowing it down to wine and looking at the wine value chain as a whole. So as we look at the wine value chain, we look at the vineyard, the winery, distribution, and of course, then we look at trade, on-trade and off-trade. I'm not sure if these are the terms that you use in terms of US, but when we're talking about on-trade, we're talking about, for example, off-trade would be retails, and on-trade would be more selling in bulk or selling in wholesale. Yeah, that's the word. And then we have, in terms of consumption, you have hospitality and retail. So looking again at some insights that from consumer when it comes to sustainable business, there is consumer research that is showing that there is a high consumer interest in sustainable produced wines. Furthermore, there is a favorable perception of certification programs. You were mentioning just before you launched the webinar, Antoinette, regarding certifications and their usefulness. And we'll get there as well, because we find them that can be a really important add-on for businesses, not only from an environmental and social perspective, but also from an economic and efficiency perspective. Consumers show a willingness to pay more for sustainably produced wines, particularly, as we've seen, particularly millennials and Generation Z. And while organic is more universally understood, sustainably produced wine has the greatest consideration for future purpose. Now, here I want to mention something that I didn't before, and it was really important that I have. Now that we're talking about organic, sustainably produced, and as I was mentioning the concept of sustainability, and when we talk about the 3 dimensions of sustainability, it is very important that we bear in mind, for example, when we're talking about sustainably produced wines, we are not just talking about sustainable viticulture. That means, for example, that an organic produced wine is not necessarily a sustainably produced one. Why? Because, for example, an organic wine might have been produced using no herbicides or pesticides, but, for example, it might have been produced with no conditions for a very unfair value chain, with no conditions for its workers, for example. Now, that is not so. Therefore, it's very important to bear in mind the difference between what is a sustainably produced product, whatever it is, and an organic product. For example, fair trade, which is a very known worldwide certification, looks at the social part, the social dimension of sustainability, and not necessarily to the environmental one. So, for example, a product that has been produced in a fair way is not necessarily a product that is environmentally safe or sustainable, because it might have been produced with a complete respect for the whole value chain when it comes to social diversity and justice, but it might have been produced in a completely unfriendly, sustainably, environmentally unfriendly way. So it is very important that we bear in mind that a sustainable product is as such when it respects the 3 dimensions that we were talking about. And this is sometimes something that is not clear for consumers. Again, some insights from the trade. For example, the Canadian market has already set bottle weight limits for wines with a certain value range, and we'll see why this is important. In the UK, 70% of wine is imported in bulk, and the various supermarket chains have strict social and environmental criteria imposed on their suppliers. To give you an example, we speak, one of our members is Marks and Spencer, and I remember one of the first conversations we had with them was understanding if we knew sustainability certifications, and which were the ones that paid more attention to what we could call the hidden slavery, which is because there is a lot of temporary work, and I'm sure in the US that's something that happens as well. For example, during harvest, there's a lot of temporary work in the wine industry, and sometimes temporary work is mixed with precarious conditions for workers. And now there should be a very clear difference between what is temporary work and what is work with no conditions whatsoever, even if it's temporary. So there are many retailers across the world that are looking more and more into this. Scandinavian monopolies, for example, are demanding sustainability certification from suppliers. Alko, which is the monopoly from Finland, for example, has set a goal of reducing the carbon footprint from packaging by 50% by 2030. And in the US, and as I mentioned, we have these studies, they come from a company called Full Research that conducted a series of research on trade and consumers regarding sustainability for the California Wine Growing Certification Alliance. I think I got this name mixed. I always do. And again, in the US, distributors see sustainability as a competitive factor, as a selling point. And just to finish, not to finish the presentation, but to finish as part of insights from producers, certifications in general contribute to a more organized business. Sustainability codes bring efficiency and savings to the operation. A less interventionist production makes the workplace safer for those who work there. We have an amazing example, and we definitely recommend that climate talk of ours. We have a climate talk called The Business Sense of Internalizing Climate Change, but it's the second edition where we had Tablas Creek, which is, you probably know Tablas Creek. We had Jason Haas, and that's one of the things that he talks about. The fact that, well, he was already a biodynamic producers, but for example, when they stopped using sulfites, if I'm not wrong, the fact that their workplace, which was at the end the vineyards, felt more and more as a place where the workers could go with their families, and that's an amazing example. Sustainability today is about risk management rather than reputation management. It is the survival of the business, of the species, that is at stake. Do it first and then communicate. Otherwise, we're going greenwashing. This is absolutely key. Do not communicate before you are actually doing it. Do not communicate something when you're saying, we're going to do this. No, communicate when you are doing it. And it's fair enough that you communicate, but when you are doing it, not before, not when you're starting. Another thing is, do a list of actions or implement sustainability indicators as work tools, whatever size of the company that you have, and in which everyone can collaborate. And we just leave you here with a sentence from another company from Napa that you probably know, that we love. I mean, indeed, this is one of our very inspiring members, Frog's Leap. Respect for terroir is not a vague marketing phrase, but rather the complete and overwhelming sensation one gets when presented with a pure product grown in a healthy living environment. From here, this is not so much about the organization itself, but what we feel is that, and this is important to Porto Protocol as an organization. As we mentioned, we start out as a commitment companies do to do more for climate change. We have more, and I realized that for some reason, my computer didn't share that, which is some of the organizations that are parts of Porto Protocol, but never mind, it's not a problem. We have companies from every size, every stage of climate action, various wine regions, various sizes, various stages of climate action, various stages of the wine industry. And just to give you an idea, we have companies that produce 2,000 cases, and we have companies that produce some of the biggest wine companies in the world. And that's how wide we are as an organization and in terms of profiles of the companies we have. And what we defend, and this is really important to us, is we defend action rather than perfection. We believe that we should start acting today, and there's no excuse not to start acting on climate change. So when you join us, you might be just starting your climate path, and that's the reason why you're joining us. Or you might join us because you are a champion when it comes to climate action, and you feel that this is so important that you feel the need, or you feel compelled to share what you are doing with others because others can learn from you. This is absolutely key in everything we do. So, and another thing, as I said at the very beginning, we do not believe in reinventing the wheel. So to give you an example, there are a number of carbon calculators out there. So instead of producing our own, we prefer to share the ones that are available for free. And we'll get there. So before even measuring, and that's one of the things that, yes, it's wonderful that businesses should measure, because that will give them a snapshot on where to go next, and it will be much easier for them to set targets if they measure their carbon footprint, if they implement a sustainability certification. That should be no excuse to delay climate action, and that's why we believe there should be different. That's why we embrace and welcome companies no matter where they are in terms of climate action. So what we decided to leave you with here is 10 actions that are low-hanging fruit when it comes to climate action. And I'll go through them. And the first starts with reducing the impact of your packaging. Why? Because I think one of the most amazing things that we learned as we embraced this project was that the thing that contributes the most to the carbon footprint of wine is not in the vineyard, is not in your winery, it's in your packaging. So depending, of course, on your business and on the weight of your bottle, packaging and the bottle itself, even before transportation, your glass bottle is the element that contributes the most to the carbon footprint of wine. And this is because producing glass is so carbon intensive. And so what we recommend, and we have very examples, again, coming from the US, one of the examples you can find on our website comes from Crimson Wine Group. I think it was one of the first companies that we spoke with that shared, and Nicholas Keeley, that will actually be in one of our next climate talks in December. Yes, in December. He's a very firm believer that companies should reduce their carbon footprint, and you can find in our website what he has done to reduce it by sourcing, for example, glass bottles domestically rather than coming from another continent, increasing a little bit the label, therefore compensating for the fact that he reduced the bottle weight, and he had no impact in terms of consumers. So reduce your bottle weight. Use carton from sustainable sources. Standardize your shipping box and choose alternative packaging. Again, there's an amazing company, and this image you have here on your right called Communal Brands from Melissa Saunders. She's a master of wine, and she's been working a lot on this issue. And as an importer, that's something that she really tries to work on. Furthermore, and I think it's really important to mention, and I'm sorry it's not here, we work with various companies from the US as well, that are members of ours, from Conscious Container, the Gotham Project, the Goods. These are all reusable bottle schemes based in different, if I'm not wrong, Conscious Container is in California, Goods and Gotham Project are in New York. So these are all companies that are working on reusable bottle schemes, and they're really addressing the issue. I mean, they're startups, they're just starting their businesses, but they are doing an amazing job really trying to reuse bottles of wine rather than having a new one for each bottle. And that's an absolutely good job that they're doing. implement nature-based solutions. I'm sorry, I have something here that is not translated. And this goes from cover crops to using nature as an indicator of what's happening in your soil. Another thing is, for example, using rooftops. So when you build your winery, for example, instead of having a normal roof, build a rooftop, build a green roof. That is a way of increasing the area that can act as a carbon sink, and use it again with indigenous species. And use your soil, use the species that grow naturally in your vineyard to know what they are telling you, what species are telling you what about the health of your soils and of your vineyards. Reevaluate in your waste sources. And here is something that you can do, not just in your winery, like, for example, rethinking the capsule that you have around your bottle. Why? You have amazing examples all over the world of companies that are taking out the glass. You can see the cork, or you can say, okay, if you use screw cap, but you can see the state of the cork inclusive. In fact, I don't know if you know, that's an interesting thing. In different countries have different reactions to cork, but cork is actually produced in a very sustainable fashion. Many people believe that you cut the tree. You do not cut the tree. In fact, you are saving the tree if you cut the cover of the tree to produce the cork. And the cork helps offset the impact of packaging, which is something that many people don't know, and there's a communication opportunity there, because that's an amazing role that the cork can have in wine. When you think about waste, don't just think of the winery. And Antoinette, I'm not looking at the time. Do tell me if I have to share. Another thing is, look at the waste in your office. Don't just think it as your vineyard or just about composting. Look at the whole wine value chain. Look at, why do you have a waste basket next to you? Try to eliminate waste baskets even in your offices. Look at everything that is waste and that can be reused. Let me give you an example from Concha Toro, which you probably know. It's a Chilean, one of the biggest wine companies in the world, that actually from the Concha Toro group, you also have two companies in the US, Bonterra and Fetzner, that are amazing examples. To give you an example of two things that Concha Toro is doing with their wine. They're using the, how should I explain this? The tubes the rolls that are used for the labels. You know, when you you take out the label, you put it on the bottle, but then you have all that plastic left, and they're giving that waste to a company that is producing packaging for dishwasher liquid. Okay, this is absolutely amazing. You can watch our climate talk on circular innovation. And another thing is, they're using the skin of the grapes. Again, they're giving it to an accessorized companies, to a company that produces accessorized for homes, for bags. And so every bag, for example, that has like that aubergine color is made from the skins of grapes that come from Concha Toro. So, and to give you another example, we have a company from Italy called Caviro. They are a cooperative, which is, I think it's a type of company that doesn't exist so much in the US, but exists a lot in Europe. And the way they perceive waste, the way they look at their waste as a raw material is because they want to make sure they make money with everything. And so here, what you see is efficiency in looking at waste, not because of an environmental reason, but from a business standpoint, which is a language that I believe that everyone can understand. Again, in your offices, very simple things. Stop coffee cups and disposable water bottles. So when you look at your waste, look at your waste bin, may it be in the vineyard, may it be in the winery, may it be in your offices. Look at your waste bin to rethink what you're doing with your waste. use animals in the vineyards. And this can go from using sheep to using bird shelters to using bees. Okay, not the idea again is to think out of the box and think of ways. This has very much to do with the natural-based solutions that we were talking about previously, and it's basically thinking of ways you can reduce chemicals to using natural-based solutions. And you don't. We don't believe in fundamentalist, and we're not even telling you to go radical, but it's very much, if we think of ourselves as humans, sometimes we don't think necessarily of taking medicine just because we have a headache. Sometimes we think of eating well and trying to prevent and looking again for ways of doing it naturally, of curing something that we might feel through preventive, through the way we eat, rather than taking a pill each time we have a simple headache. So the same applies to the way we look at our vineyards, is to work hand in hand in nature rather than trying to manipulate it. At the end of the day, that's what we're talking about. Look at carbon as a solution rather than as a problem. In fact, Antoinette, you're part of our carbon management workshop, and this is exactly what we're trying to do. Yes, carbon is a source of a problem, but is also the source of a solution. And when it comes to wine, more and more you are seeing companies, wine producers implementing carbon farming, that is trying to look at the way of soil is a carbon sink in itself. So it's a way of looking at your soil in a way that you can make sure that you're boosting that capacity it has naturally of sinking carbon. Measure your carbon footprint and look at your vineyard as an ecosystem, not just your vineyard, but look around, make sure that you're promoting biodiversity in a way that, again, you don't have 100 acres of land that are 100 acres of vineyards. Make sure that you're promoting biodiversity around it, respecting, for example, all the natural, not river, but all the natural water, help me out here, I'm missing the word. Make sure you respect the ecosystem as a whole. Not even your soil is part of your ecosystem. Every tree you have around your vineyard is an ecosystem, and therefore promoting biodiversity. And although not many companies are doing this worldwide, it is possible to capture the carbon that comes out of your fermentation, especially taking into account that this carbon is in a pure state. It's more pure than the one that we breathe, so to speak, every day that comes out of our cars or airplanes. So more and more, luckily, we have some of our members that are doing this already. And there's a lot of experiments to be done. And there's a lot of learning that should come also from other industries, and that we should not close ourselves when it comes to wine, and try to see what other industries are doing that we can replicate in our wine world. Manage your resources mindfully. And this goes from water to energy. You were mentioning that you had Napa Green as a guest. I'm not sure if it was it Anna Britton? Okay, so I'm sure Anna said something that I have to repeat here that we learned from her, which is don't, oh God, no, I had a blank. Don't solarize your inefficiencies. So yes, go into please do, especially if you're, for example, in California, you probably have sun almost all year round. So yes, go into renewables, but before going to renewables, make sure that all your inefficiencies are taken care of. And this, again, when we talk, for example, use all your, and you have a huge problem, you're facing really serious problems with droughts and water scarcity, and starting with water, treat your wastewaters, make sure you're using every drop of rain that comes out, make sure that you have no leaks anywhere in terms of water, manage your irrigation in a mindful fashion, and measure your water footprint, install calculators wherever you have. And one of the things that we learned, for example, from California, and it was with Frog's Leap actually, because they dry farm, is that many years ago, dry farming was a common practice in California, not an exception, but rather the rule. And that's an interesting factor that we learned. And again, when it comes to energy, as I was mentioning, don't solarize your inefficiency. Make sure that you take all the advantage possible of natural light in your winery, for example, and that you have lighting, LED lighting, LED lighting, not just in your winery, but also in your offices. Turn off your computers. Make sure your staff is aware of the fact that turning off the light is just as basic as that, is a way of reducing your carbon footprint. So yes, go bold, but go simple as well when it comes to resources management, maybe water or energy in general. And we must not forget social responsibility, because we are talking about sustainability. So we could tell, yes, especially when it comes to the US, we could talk about diversity and equity. But if we have this basic rule in mind, which is to treat others like we would like to be treated, or treat others like they would like to be treated, that is such an easy concept to understand and to put in place. You don't need a sustainability plan to understand that you should treat others fairly, with fair wages, with living wages, promoting diversity across the company and positions, not just in your vineyard, making sure that you are transparent about it, ensuring the safety and training of your workers, involving them, engaging them in the sustainability process, that they have the right to rest and to promote healthy living and work, of course, as a team. Think local. And this is very easy to think across everything else we've seen. If giving preference to local suppliers, getting involved with local communities. And actually, Antoinette, one of the important things, for example, when we're talking about greenwashing, I think that we just mentioned slightly before, we were talking about only communicate when you do, not before you start doing it. For example, one of the easy ways to spot, so to speak, greenwashing is, for example, when companies implement measures that don't have to do with their core business, okay? So, and when we think of thinking local and getting involved with your communities is a way of trying to make thinking local enables you to make sure you impact your ecosystem as a company, because your ecosystem is not just nature, is your staff, your suppliers, your community, all that is your ecosystem. So when you think sustainably, you're trying to think on how, this is also thinking locally, is thinking how you impact your neighbors, whomever they may be. So that's also part of thinking locally. Organize a community cleanup, open your doors to visits from locals. And last but not least, collaborate and share. That's what we are about. I think that's also, at the end of the day, sustainable development goal number 17, and open your doors and collaborate with producers, enter your community, between regions, between countries, among other economic agents. And to give you an example that is completely different, I remember, for example, when we had the climate talk with Concha Toro, and she was talking about circular innovation. She was saying, Valentina Lida, that's the name of the sustainability manager, and she was telling us how circular innovation requires radical cooperation. So imagine that if we think local in terms of collaboration and cooperation, If we think of our community, imagine what we can do with our waste, thinking of the industries that are around us, thinking that we can learn from the producer from the vineyard next door, from the producer next door. So when we think out of the box on how we can cooperate and collaborate towards a better future, this gains a whole new dimension. So, and that's why I was giving you these two examples that have nothing to do with each other, but that show how we can collaborate, think local, think circular in completely different ways that will make our business better. So that was more or less things that we learn on a daily basis. As I mentioned, I didn't tell you about well, this will be completely changing the subject. We couldn't build everything we do without our team, without our members. We have local representatives in various regions, namely in the US. We have Robin Lale, which is the founder of Lale Vineyards. She's an amazing, amazing woman. We have Ken Pogash also in your area, actually. We have an amazing global steering committee, which is, and I must mention them as well, with Diana Sace. She's American, but she lives in France. She's a winemaker at a company called Domaine du Jacques, but also Snowden Vineyards. But most of all, she's a passionate climate activist. Professor Greg Jones, that is a former professor at Linfield University, one of the most renowned names in terms of climatology and wine. Actually, you met him in our first session of the carbon management workshop. We have Dr. Richard Smart, a viticulture from Australia that is also known worldwide. And then we have a biologist from Portugal called Nuno Gaspar de Oliveira. And they help us make sure that everything we do is valid and meaningful for the wine industry. What we're trying to do is really build this platform, and these examples that we've given you just now, this low-hanging fruit, is what is shared with us by our members, what we learn with our members every day. And we try to find ways of reinventing ourselves in the sense of asking ourselves every day, how do we add value to the wine value chain, to the wine community worldwide every day? That's why we created our carbon management workshop, which you are a part of. That's why we have our climate talks every month with different topics, all to do with climate, with wine and a changing climate. We will be launching a project called 101 Actions for Climate, Solutions for the Wine Industry, that is really trying to make sure that we cover not only actions that or solutions or best practice that are more suitable for vineyards and wineries and packaging, but also include governments and education, and to make sure we cover the whole wine value chain in the most collaborative way. This is something, this portfolio that we'll be launching, hopefully by the end of the year, will be co-authored by all our members and a few other companies outside our community. And so this is who we are and how we're trying to add value to the wine community. I'll stop sharing now. Oh my God, I'm so sorry. I said I thought I wouldn't be talking for half an hour, and here I am talking for the last hour. Sorry for that.
Thank you so much for your time. I realize the time difference, and I'm so grateful for all of the moments you spent with us this evening. Before we say good night, are there any final points you would like to highlight for the viewers?
I think the most important message is that it's not the industry that is at stake as we speak, it's our species. This is not possible to be a climate denier as we speak. It starts with each of us. It starts at home. It doesn't start it doesn't start in our company, because all of us, before we're business people, before we are retailers, before we are consumers, we are all people. The policymakers are people like us, like you and me. And so the change starts at home. So before we demand change for from anyone else. We should start with ourselves. We should walk our talk. And there's no excuse not to start acting today. There's so many ways, both on an individual basis or as a company, as we saw right now, if you're a wine producer. Looking at your waste makes sense, not just in your company, but in your home. So start today. I mean, it doesn't matter. We want, again, action, not perfection.
Excellent. Not perfection, but action. I love that.
Yeah.
That's brilliant. Well, thanks again. And thank you. All. I mean, Marta, I hope to have you back on here. And if ever Porto Protocol comes to the United States, I hope.
We'd love to. There's a lot of emissions there, but yeah.
That's right. And I did just a quick note for those who haven't watched it. The emissions from the last conference that you held were offset by plantings that tailors had put in ground. So you're really thinking about every aspect of everything, of the whole picture. So. Yeah, for people to know, this is really a very comprehensive organization and program.
Thank you, Antoinette.
Yes, absolutely. So we look forward to featuring our next Sustainability in Wine Country event hosted on Thursday, And access to past masterclasses may be found on our YouTube page, Cork and Fork, as well as by scanning the QR code that we present in store at Cork and Fork in Logan Circle. And this will take you to our YouTube page where you can look at all of the different recordings we have from the series. Additional program details may be found on our website at corkandfork.co under calendar. Thank you again for joining us, Marta, and take care.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Good night.